Okay, it's great to see everyone here Sunday morning. Hope everyone's doing well. Hope everyone had a great Shabbos, a great weekend. Let's begin. Today, I want to do something a little bit different. As you may or may not know, my wife works at the local all-girls high school. In our neighborhood, we have an all-boys high school and an all-girls high school. And periodically, they have retreats where they go away for a day or two. And yesterday, they had a Shabbaton, like a Shabbos retreat. So they hired a bus and they drove to this place, this campsite, about 2 hours away. And because my wife's on the staff, she brought her family. There were actually 4 staff families there. I came without my 2 older boys for obvious reasons. It's an all-girls event. But we went to this nice campsite. It was a little bit of an older place, some crumbling infrastructure, a little bit decrepit, but that's okay. You have to bring your own linen and sheets. It was a little bit of a Spartan environment. You got to make the food ahead of time. You get there, you have to prepare for Shabbos. So one of the husbands of one of the staff members there, he built an Eruv, which is a complicated halachic device that makes an area one unified domain, so you could carry within the campsite. But we got a nice cabin. It was nice. The weather was pretty miserable. It was raining nonstop and it was cold, but it was an enjoyable weekend, enjoyable Shabbos, really. And we actually did it last year, and we did it again this year. And the highlight, everyone agreed that the highlight of the Shabbos was the panel that they had. They had 3 rabbis on a panel. This is before lunch on Shabbos. And they had to ask the rabbi session. And there was a moderator, and it was interactive. But the girls submitted questions ahead of time. And we had a discussion, and they would ask the question, and then, some of the people on the panel would chime in. So they asked me if I would join the panel, and I said, sure. And it's a little bit embarrassing to say, but I kind of hijacked the panel, if you know what I mean. You can't ask all these juicy questions and expect me to keep quiet, especially, as you know, it's like my favorite thing to do is to debate and to argue, and I don't get enough opportunity to do it. But I want to go through some of the questions that came up, some of the questions that were submitted. These are the ones that really got the most discussion. And I figured we'll go through some of these questions and talk about the discussion that ensued. And it would be interesting and hopefully useful and productive. Some of these subjects I don't think I've ever spoken about. So now is a good opportunity to dive in. So I selected 3 questions that garnered the most debate and discussion. And I want to go through the questions and some of the answers and or positions that were staked afterwards, some of the discussion that ensued, some of the follow-up questions I thought was really interesting. And I want to go through it today with you. So the first question, maybe the most controversial question on the list, is why do Jews think they are better than everyone else? So right away they went to Jewish supremacy, Jewish elitism, chauvinism. Why do we think that we are better? Now, it's important to note, whenever you have a question, it invariably has an assumption in the question. When you ask a why, you're obviously assuming that this is true. And now you want an explanation as to why it's true. But we first have to evaluate the veracity of the assumption. Is it, in fact, true that Jews think that they are better than everyone else? Because if it's not true, then it's not a good question because the assumption is flawed. So before we dig into the reasons why this may be true, we have to understand whether or not the assumption is, in fact, true. Do Jews think that we are better than everyone else? So I think if we look at the literature and some of the philosophy on this subject, you can make a very good argument that we do think that we're better than everyone else. After all, we call ourselves the chosen people. Of all the peoples, how many different nations are there? How many different peoples are there? And we claim to be the chosen one. And not only that, it's featured in the Torah. God chose Abraham and his descendants. At Sinai, we're described as a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. We're described as Banim Atim LaHashem Elokechem. You are children to Hashem, your God. Ahavti Eschem Amar Hashem. God says, I loved you. V'lasitcha Elyon. You are Elyon. You are supreme. You are above others. And of course, we claim to be God's representatives in the world. We're the only ones who bear the Almighty's Torah. The Almighty's Torah, his cherished treasure that he used to create the world, he gave it to us. And he even submitted himself and his holy retinue to the decisions of the human courts. When is Rosh Hashanah? Well, God says, let me wait until the human courts determine. When is Yom Kippur? When is Pesach? He forged a covenant, multiple covenants, between our nation and the rest, between himself and our nation. Now, there were some covenants between God and all of humanity, but there are additional covenants between God and us. We have his Torah, we have his mitzvos, we have his land. We're considered his children. We have special oversight. We have an elevated soul. Now, of course, this soul comes with more responsibility. When a potential convert comes before a court seeking a conversion, so the Talmud tells the conversion candidate, now, as a non-Jew, you could eat pork and drive your car on Shabbos and eat all kinds of things, and there's no problem. You won't suffer no ill effects, not in this world and in the next world. All these mitzvos that restrict your life, that limit the things you're allowed to do, will be foisted upon you once you convert. Are you sure you want to do that? So part and parcel, in unison, commensurate to our, so to speak, assumed supremacy, comes our supreme responsibility. But I think if we were to grade the assumption of the question, why do Jews think that they're better, we could accept it as true, provided that we're talking about better in a given area. So are we better at, writing, at playing music, at shooting hoops, at running the marathon? We're not better in those areas. But with respect to the agenda of the soul, with respect to the pursuit of holiness, with respect to the mission of perfecting the world, with respect to connecting to the Creator, in all matters of the soul, we do believe that we are the most capable, the most gifted. And if those areas, as we believe, are the most important areas, then I think the assumption can be graded as true that we think that we're better. And therefore, we have to ask the question, well, why do we think that we're better? I think it's a fair question. And it demands an answer. And I think this is a subject that we've talked about in the past, but let's address it head on. We have to accept that we're better, but not due to anything that we did ourselves. Even in the Torah, we read several times in the Torah, Moshe tells the Jewish people, you're going to get the land, but not because you're so righteous. You think it's due to you? Oh no, you were born into this. The reason why you're getting the land is A, because the current inhabitants of the land are not acting in a righteous way that merits that they are able to endure in the land. And B, because you happen to have your ancestors are Abram, Isaac, and Jacob. And they were special, not because they were gifted it, they were granted, it was bequeathed to them, but because they worked harder than anyone else at developing and deepening their connection and their relationship with the Almighty. And they stood up for their faith, and they endured tremendous trials to preserve their faith. And you won the lottery because you're their descendants. And therefore you are incorporated into the nation that they spawned. Abraham was chosen. But once Abraham was chosen, he was also chosen to be the father of the nation that will be the Almighty's representatives. God chose Abraham, and it was completely meritocratic. Anyone could have been Abraham. In fact, Noah is criticized by our sages by the fact that he had the potential to be like Abraham. He had the potential to even be like Moshe, but he didn't quite live up to that potential. And therefore, we're not descendants of Noah, even though we are, of course, but our nation does not have Noah as one of its founders because Noah did not quite live up to the level that would be required to be the founding father of this nation of God. But Abraham was. And God said to Abraham, okay, you've earned it, not just for you, but for your children. And specifically, Isaac, not Ishmael, and even amongst Isaac, Jacob, and not Esau. And thus we have Abram, Isaac, and Jacob, and that is the founding of the nation. So we have it. We have this great connection with the Almighty from day one. The child is circumcised. They're 8 days old. And the blessing that we say at the circumcision is lahachniso b'vriso shel Avraham Avinu, to enter the child into the covenant of Abraham. Now, what has an 8-day-old child done? What have they accomplished? Why are they worthy of joining this fraternity, this nation? What have they done? They've done absolutely nothing. But that is all attributed back to Abraham. So that's kind of an important component of this answer. But there's another point, and this I didn't speak about at length on Shabbos because even though I was thinking about it, there were a lot of people in the room, and I had some fellow panelists that also wanted to say a thing or two, but I'll tell it to you. Abraham had such a complete vise on holiness and righteousness. He had absorbed and integrated and assimilated this high level of righteousness and this high level of faith and this incredible level of kindness and hospitality into his bones that it actually joined his genetic code, and it was endowed and bequeathed to his descendants. And therefore, even though we haven't done something to earn it at the very beginning of our life, we're already part of this. Nevertheless, we do have some element of Abraham coursing within us. The Mishnah tells us that there were 10 generations from Noah to Abraham. And in the very next Mishnah, this is in chapter 5 of Ethics of Our Fathers, it says that Abraham was tested with 10 tests. So we have successive Mishnahs talking about Abraham. But if you examine the precise words of the Mishnah carefully, you will see that Abraham's name is changed. In the first Mishnah, when it talks about the genealogy of Noah to Abraham, it just calls him Avraham, Abraham. But by the second Mishnah, when it talks about Abraham's tests, it calls him Avraham Avinu, Abraham, our father. We're talking about the same person. Why in the first Mishnah is he called Abraham without any honorifics or appellations or suffixes? And in the second Mishnah, it's the same person. He's called Abraham, our father. So the commentaries explain that Abraham's 10 tests were not just a conflict in which an individual was placed. It was a test of such difficulty that when he succeeded and he triumphed in each one of these 10 tests respectively, he actually acquired and absorbed those qualities. And that pattern continued with Isaac and Jacob. And therefore, those qualities, you read the Torah tells us all these stories, these individual stories about Abraham. Why is that important for us to know? We read about he met these 3 people, he thought they were just travelers, and he ran and he did, and he got meat and he got butter and he got everything, running around 3 days after his circumcision. Why is that salient to us? Now we know the answer. Because Abraham's kindness and hospitality, it's not just his own personal greatness that's at play over here. These are characteristics that he bequeathed onward to his descendants. And therefore, even though we didn't do anything to earn this part of this union with God, we come from Abraham, and it's not just a familial link. We also have some of Abraham's characteristics within us. And God chose him and his descendants. And it wasn't always so pleasant. Part of what is included in this package, it's nice to say that, we're supreme, we're better than everyone else, but what comes along with it? God tells Abraham, it's going to be a very long time before your family that will burgeon into a nation will be at Sinai, will get the land of Israel. You're going to need to spend 400 years in a foreign land as slaves. That's part of the package. And Abraham signed off on that. Which other nation endured those 400 years in Egypt as slaves? Which other nation endured the whole history of our people? No one else did. So with those qualities of closeness and responsibility comes a national history that has incredible highs and very, very painful lows. With this higher degree of responsibility, with the Torah and the manna and the Sinai and Moshe and the land of Israel, comes this really short leash. Because we have this national destiny and mission, and if we veer off track, we get lambasted and reprimanded and punished more severely than anyone else. And that's all part of this package. You could have asked this question in a different way. It would be the same answer. The question that was posed is, why do we think we're better? The very same answer would apply to the following question: why have we suffered more than anyone else? It's the same answer. There's a bundle of characteristics that apply to God's nation. And part of it is very positive. You'll have this closeness, you're part of this fraternity. Your prayers will go more directly to God. You'll have his Torah, you'll have his land when you are worthy. But part and parcel in that is that if you veer off track, you'll be smacked harder in a more ringing fashion than anyone else. No other nation has had this history of exile, for example, that we have had. That's part of the package. You have responsibility to finish what Abraham started. Abraham started in a world that was barren. God's presence was ignored or non-existent in the eyes and the minds of humanity. And he started the process to change that. And part of that process is you're going to have the Torah, the superpower to help you change it. But you're also going to have some trips throughout the world. You're going to spread the message. You're going to be an itinerant people. Where have we been over the last 3,500 years since Abraham? Well, where have we not been? Part of what it means, part of this bundle, you're going to need to spread to a lot of different places. And every place you go, hopefully you elevate that place and those people there. And hopefully you collect the sparks of holiness that are there. And you spread and exude the influence of Abraham. And once you're done with a certain location, you move on to the next place. And just as the Jewish people in the wilderness had 42 stops, 42 stations, the Jewish people in our history, we're going to be in 42 different countries before the arrival of Messiah. That's all part of the package. As a sidebar, place number 42 is none other than the United States of America. We're getting close to the end. But that too is part of the bundle. Why has our nation endured such exile? Same answer. We are granted more spiritual potential, more closeness than anyone else, more responsibility, a shorter leash, and by the way, a broader arc of potential. With the more elevated soul comes a more elevated Yetzer Hara. If you have a more elevated soul, then the counterweight to that, the Yetzer Hara, is also going to be stronger. And that's why Jews, we see this historically, are capable of some of the worst sins. No other nation could have pulled off the golden calf. No one else can do it. At a time of such holiness, 40 days after Sinai, how is that even possible? It makes no sense to us. No other nation is capable of that. Why? With that elevated soul comes an elevated antagonist. It's all part of the bundle. And that's what Abraham signed up for. Not just for him, but for his descendants. And here's the thing that really removes the sting of the question. It's not just Abraham's biological descendants that are part of this. Abraham opted in. Anyone else can still opt in. It's a beautiful thing. Anyone can join. Race and creed and color and country of origin doesn't matter. And if someone wants to join, they are welcome to do so. And they become literally the children of Abraham and Sarah. Our sages tell us that there were souls that Abraham and Sarah made in Haran. Now, how exactly Abraham and Sarah made souls in Haran before they went to the land of Canaan? That's, of course, a very hard question to answer. But our sages tell us those souls are still available to be assigned to righteous converts. And thus, when someone converts, they become Ben Avraham and Bat Sarah, son of Abraham, daughter of Sarah. Wait a minute, they're not part of this family. They grew up someplace else in a different nation. Well, once they convert, there is a system in which they actually get one of those souls, and thus they are literally the descendants of Abraham and Sarah. But to talk about the question just briefly, are we better? Do we think we're better? Are Navy SEALs better than other members of the armed forces? Are they better? Well, depending on what we're talking about. Are they better at accounting? Are they better guitar players? Can they shoot free throws better? Can they play chess better? No, it's not what Navy SEALs excel at. But if you have a mission to go into enemy territory and to do a surgical strike, and it's a tricky and dangerous and demanding mission, who do you want? You want the Navy SEALs. We are the spiritual Navy SEALs. We have the pedigree, we have the training, and we have the mission, the greatest mission of them all, to change the entire world. And anyone wants to sign up? And anyone who wants to sign up can, in fact, do so. Now, I said this answer in a much more truncated version on Shabbos, but someone asked an interesting and important follow-up. Jews think they're better, and Jews think that they have it all figured out. And you have the books of Jewish philosophy, and everything's organized, everything makes sense. But don't the Christians also have some system that they like? And they think that they're the chosen ones? And don't the Muslims think that they're the chosen ones? There are a lot of different nations and religions that also assume that they are supreme. So why are we different? And of course, this is the opposite of the original question. The original question is, well, why do we think we're different and better? Well, if everyone thinks they're better, it's really not so unique. But we got into this discussion about the Christians and the Muslims who think that they have it all figured out. So the first thing I said is that our system, our understanding of what our mission is, it's not just something we feel. You feel you're better. We have evidence. We know the Torah is true. And we understand, based upon our tradition and based upon the evidence, we understand what our mission is. And then this girl chimed in, well, what's the evidence? So I said, do you listen to podcasts? Do you listen to podcasts? I could point you to many, many episodes that we've done on that subject. But the girl said something really, I think, really interesting and important to address. You know, we claim that we have the evidence and they don't. So she said, well, someone, it can't be, there's 1 billion Muslims and 1 billion Christians. Someone must have an explanation. Someone somewhere has to have an understanding, and there must be some explanation. After all, you have so many people, there must be some sort of rationale that really pulls it all together. So to me, I think this is something that a lot of people think in many areas. You know, if there's such a mass, such a critical mass of people who believe something, there must be some way to reconcile everything. It's important to remember, though, many people in the past, maybe some in the present, believe that the world was flat and the universe was infinite and it had no beginning. Just because a lot of people believe one thing doesn't mean it's not wrong. Exhibit A on that is the Christians and the Muslims. Those two religions, and I don't profess to be an expert in neither one of them, but from what I understand, and fact check me on this, this provides definitive evidence that there's a possibility for 1 billion plus people to be wrong. Well, how so? If the Christians are right, then the Muslims are wrong. If the Muslims are right, then the Christians are wrong. These are mutually exclusive and incompatible. You either believe in JC or you don't. You either believe in Muhammad or you don't. we have two systems, each with more than 1 billion adherents. And we know for sure that they can't both be right. And therefore, at least one of them's got to be wrong. And therefore, we know for sure, we have evidence that it's possible to have 1 billion people all be wrong. Now, the truth is, they're both wrong. That's the truth. They're both wrong. And we can be thankful, humanity can be thankful that both of them are wrong. We've mentioned this in the past. Talmud tells us, you could be a righteous Gentile and get a portion of the world to come. So the nice thing about it is that because they're both wrong and we're right, there's room for someone who's a righteous Muslim and even a righteous Christian to get a portion in the world to come. But this idea that there must be some sort of rationale and explanation, there must be some way, there's got to be somewhere, someone who knows it all. The Talmud talks about this. The Talmud says that idolatry, it's always from a distance. You always learn about this idol somewhere in Nepal, in Rome. There's a theologian in Rome and they have it all figured out. There's some guru on a mountaintop in Nepal and they really have it all figured out. Everyone is sure that somewhere, someone else has an explanation. But is that something to rely on? When we have everything organized here, not some distant place, here, everything's organized, everything's clear, everything's logical, we have a comprehensive explanation for an entire system, and it all makes sense to consider that maybe there's someone who we don't know. We don't have his name, his email address, nothing. We don't know. There's just this idea. That's the way that the idolatry used to work. It was always, you always heard about them at a distance. You get close and you don't see any substance. And therefore it's always painted, from a distance. Here's the secret. They don't have any explanations. We have it all. And we can withstand, and we have withstood withering scrutiny. And we have the exact same text of the Torah for thousands of years. And we're studying the same Talmud for thousands of years. And we're following the same laws from time immemorial. No one's found a mistake yet. No one's had any good questions that cannot be resolved by yeshiva students. You don't need to go to Nepal. You don't need to go to some idea of some distant guru who knows it all. Why would we abandon what we have right over here for some sort of fanciful thought that maybe there's someone who knows something that just never publicized it? That was the follow-up to the discussion. But that was a first question, which was really interesting subject. I think it's fair to say that, listen, we believe that we have the Almighty's wisdom. And we're very lucky to have it. And we understand why we have it. And we also understand what it demands of us, because the demands upon us are very large demands. And there's a whole package that comes along with it. There's a whole system that comes along with it. And we have evidence and we have logic. Everything works out beautifully. That was the first question. Shall we dig into the second question? Of course, if you have any comments or questions, you could always email me, rabbi@wolbe.com. Here's the second question, very different subject. What is wrong with watching bad movies and TV shows? Now, just some background. People in our community, it's very common for people to not have televisions. In America, there's a lot of cord cutting now. But the idea of not watching media, not watching TV or movies, not going to the movies. It's actually widespread in our communities. And the girl wants to know, what's wrong with it? It's harmless. It's harmless. What are you risking? Why is it so bad? So this is a good question. I think it needs to be addressed. If you're going to tell someone, hey, the average kid in America, by the time they're 9, they have a smartphone and not Facebook. Facebook's just for old people now, I've been reliably told. But they have Instagram and, of course, TikTok and Snapchat. And there's television, and you watch your TV shows. Why is it discouraged in our communities? So this is an important question. We have to address it. I thought there were 4 potential problems with all sorts of media. Now, I preface by saying I'm not some sort of a puritanical absolutist. I have seen a movie in the past. I've listened to some podcasts that are not just Torah. I've read some secular books. In general, our familial policy, we're not so insular. We're just not. Maybe we should be more, I don't know. But our kids are exposed to the world outside of us. But what's the principle? What's the philosophy? What would be a potential problem for someone to watch media, be it fiction or nonfiction, to be engaged in all sorts of influences that come from the world outside? So I thought there were 4 problems, starting from the easiest to explain to the more complicated or the more subtle. So the first thing I thought is that we have a finite amount of time here. And even if it's not so harmful to watch television or to watch a movie, it does take up some of your very precious time. The Mishnah tells us 1 second of Torah, of repentance, of mitzvos in this world, well, that's worth more than anything you could possibly imagine. And once you're dead, you can't do a single mitzvah. Yeah, of course, your family could do in your merit. Your children could do a mitzvah and you benefit vicariously through them. If someone dedicates something in your merit or in your memory, some Torah, a Torah book, of course, a Torah podcast, some sort of Torah initiative, that Torah is attributed to you. Of course, we know that. But you yourself can't do any mitzvahs once you pass. And we don't know how long we have over here. We know it's a finite amount of time. And we want to allocate that time in the most productive fashion. So the first problem, I would think, is the question of the resource, the most valuable and prized resource. That's our time. It should be used judiciously. There's a wonderful and quite mystifying midrash in this past week's parsha. The parsha starts off that Sarah was 127 years old when she passed. That number, 127, appears one other place in our scripture. In the beginning of the book of Esther, it talks about Achashverosh. He ruled over 127 countries. So, of course, we would say that that's a total coincidence. 127. The Midrash tells us something amazing. The Midrash says that Rabbi Akiva was giving a lecture and the audience started to snooze. They were nodding off. They started to lapse into a shluff. And he wanted to wake them up. He wanted to arouse them from their slumber. So he said, why did Esther, of course, Esther goes on to marry Achashverosh, why did she merit to rule over 127 countries? Rabbi Akiva's giving a lecture. I would imagine we have some descriptions of lectures from the times of the Mishnah. It could have been a 16-hour lecture. Today, at 45 minutes, everyone And when that's it, they tap out, they're done. But in antiquity, people had more stamina. Who knows? Maybe it was an hour 20 of a marathon lecture. Someone in the back starts nodding off. Rabbi Akiva says, well, throws out a question to wake them up. Why did Esther merit to rule over 127 countries? Because she's a great granddaughter of Sarah, and Sarah was righteous for 127 years, and for every year of Sarah's life that she was righteous, she earned the merit of her great granddaughter Esther to rule over one country. Now, if Rabbi Akiva says that, it sounds so quizzical. It might get your attention. It might wake you up, and he may continue on his lecture. But simply put, he wanted to wake them up. So he said something so unexpected that by the sheer strangeness of what he said, it would wake them up from their sleep. But the Hasidic masters, they discover a deeper message here. And the students were drowsing. They were dozing off. They were snoozing. And he was trying to tell them the importance of not forfeiting even a second of our potential. Sarah lived for 127 years. Every single minute of every single year was used properly. She didn't coast for even a second. That's why she's the matriarch. That's why she's even greater than Abraham as a prophetess. When you filter 127 years of righteousness through the Almighty's system of reward and punishment, how does it get amplified? How does it get properly recompensed? In an empire that rules 127 countries. And every country has got provinces, and the provinces have regions, and the regions have cities, and the cities have neighborhoods, and the neighborhoods have little streets. So if every year earns a whole country, and every minute gives you, a small cul-de-sac or a small subdivision, every second is precious. Every mitzvah unlocks worlds. Every moment is to be cherished. And that's the deeper message. Don't forfeit even a second of your life. Don't forfeit even a smidgen of your potential. I think that would be one reason why we should avoid anything that's not productive. Now, it's important to note, if you need to unwind and you need to kind of relax a little bit, and you want to put on some relaxing music with Bach and Beethoven, and you want to have a cigar and a whiskey, and you need to relax and unwind, that can be a mitzvah. Because the mitzvah is to do what you need to accomplish what you need to accomplish. And sometimes we need to unwind. In 127 years, Sarah also took naps, I'm sure. Why? Because that's what you need. There's a difference between saying, listen, I need to unwind, and therefore I'm going to do something that's not really on task, versus making the thing that's not on task as a goal unto its own. I think that's point number one. Our time is very important, and we have to be very assiduous in how we allocate it. Another point I thought would be important. When people watch movies and they see things that we're not really supposed to see. If you lived in a village someplace in the steppes of Europe or the steppes of Asia or the mountains of Afghanistan 200 years ago, how many homicides would you see? How much bloodshed would you see? You might see some. but not as much as the average 5-year-old in America sees in an afternoon. We have a sensitive and delicate soul, and we're supposed to feel certain things. And when we get exposed to all these things that are supposed to be shocking to us, we get calloused to them and we get desensitized to them. It actually is quite ruinous to our life over here. They might create us with a very sensitive and delicate and impressionable soul, and we're supposed to react in certain ways when we experience and encounter certain things, but we grow apathetic when those things, for example, are just beamed into our brains all the time. So there's another point that could be potentially harmful to us if we expose ourselves to too much media. A third thing that I thought maybe will be problematic with too much media, and that is the question of who is shaping our worldview on a variety of areas. What is our attitudes? What are our mores about a whole host of things? What's right and what's wrong, what's moral, what's ethical, what's good? We have a system called the Torah. And that removes any room for any arbitrary opinions about every matter. We say, you know what, the Almighty created the world. He is the absolute source of truth. He is the absolute source of righteousness. I'm going to allow the Almighty to say, this is what's right, this is what's wrong, this is what's good, this is what you should embrace, this is what you should repel. I'm just going to outsource that to him. That's what the Torah is about. Let the Torah shape you and determine how you see the world. The second you open up your mind to other sources, then there's the risk. What if they say good things? What if they say bad things? There may be some good things that they may mold you with, but there may be some very harmful things that they mold you with. And how you see the world will be governed by what kind of inputs you have. And therefore, you want to be very selective in the kinds of inputs that you embrace, because that's going to shape you. You are malleable. Our brain can be very easily manipulated. And when we choose to adopt one way of thinking or one way of seeing the world, that's going to have a very material impact on our lives. A lot of people think, well, I can absorb it all and make my own decisions. Most people are not that capable. And let's not overestimate our ability to be like Abraham and go up against the entire world. This relates to the subject that we talked about in the past. Why did everyone do idolatry? You think it's not possible for this to happen to us as well? You think it's not possible even in modern times for entire nations to be mobilized to do things that are very, very evil? We don't have to look very far to find examples of that. That's the power of the inputs that we choose. Are you willing to cede control of your worldview to someone else? To some programmer, to some on-air personality, to some pundit, to some screenwriter? You want to do that? That to me is it's like an insidious kind of danger. It doesn't happen right away, but it is a potential danger that cannot be ignored. And to me, this would be a very good argument that people can make for why they would be very wary of what sorts of things and media they're going to be exposed to. Give an example of this phenomenon. In 1996, Bill Clinton, a Democrat, signed a law called DOMA, Defense of Marriage Act. 1996, I was 10 years old. I'm not that old now. It's 25 years ago, something like that. This past week, there was a law. I don't know what the name of the law is, but a law that did the exact opposite of DOMA and that enshrined what's called marriage equality into law. How do you go from the complete opposite of the spectrum? How did that happen that within 25 years, there was one law to defend traditional marriage to a law defending the marriage equality, as it's called? Now, again, let's not talk about the merits of that case. It's beside the point. How did this shift happen so fast? If you were to ask the people in 1996, is this what you believe? Yes. Why do you believe it? Because it's what's right. And you ask people today, why do you support it? Because it's what's right. The real answer is that, humans haven't changed that much in 25 years, but our attitudes have been altered because it's very easy relatively to change such a fundamental belief when you have control of the inputs. Those inputs determine how people see reality. Again, I don't want to get into a subject, I don't want to get into a debate about this particular subject, but this is just an example that happened right now of this phenomenon at play. And again, there are, of course, a lot of good things that can be done with mass media. But it's very important to know what the philosophy behind it is, because that is going to shape what is going to emerge from those inputs. So that's the third thing that I thought would be potentially problematic with exposing oneself or someone's family to these sources of media. And finally, the last point that I thought was salient, it's the most subtle of them all, and that is that we have balancing on our shoulders this titanic superpower called a brain. And the brain is capable of incredible things. But the brain can operate in different waves, different systems, different manners. On one hand, there's the intellect, and that's capable of immense things. On the other hand, there's what's called fantasy or imagination, fiction. Our sages tell us that the Yetzer Hara tries to commandeer our brain and take control of it and operate the world in a virtual reality. And really the epicenter of our struggle with the Yetzer Hara is who is in charge of the superpower, who is the driving force behind the brain. When we study Torah, even if we study something that's not relevant to you, a lot of what we studied in yeshiva had no practical applications. But the Torah is designed to empower, to strengthen our logical parts of the brain and to suppress the fantasy, imagination parts of the brain. That's the Yetzer Hara's domain. Any sort of riveting video or movie that you watch, it is a submission to the Yetzer Hara's system of how the brain should operate. And it is a zero-sum game. If one side is elevated, has more power, the other side, by definition, is going to be weakened. And therefore, when you choose to expose yourself to stories, and they can be harmless, you have to realize that there is a trade-off here, and that you're allowing your brain to do the kind of passive enjoyment of stuff, of experiences, of sensations that's going to weaken the other part or the other system of the brain's operations. And that's a trade-off. And I want to again reiterate, I'm not an absolutist on this subject, but there was a question that was raised, and I thought that these would be the four potential issues at play. And again, I don't want to give off the impression that we don't read any secular books, we don't listen to any secular media, we happen to not have a television, we don't have a television. But when we drive to Canada, I put on some videos on these devices for the kids. I don't want to give off any false impressions. But when we talk about this subject, the average American watches how many hours of television a day? 4 or 5? What's happening over here, or the dangers, in my opinion, are these 4 things. Let's quickly cover the third question that I selected. I know that we went a little bit longer than I intended in these 2 questions. But this was an interesting one because it does show the assumption. The assumption is really interesting. Is it worth committing your whole life in this world to the next world if you don't know 100% that it exists? In this world, we kind of know. I don't want to get into I think, therefore I am kind of debates. But we know what this world is. It's a known quantity. Olam haba, this world after we die, and what happens then in our soul. To us, that's much more theoretical. It's much more abstract. We may have our doubts. So why would we exchange this world for the next world? That's the question as I understand it. I have 3 answers to this. And of course, these can be elaborated upon, but let's quickly go through them. So first of all, I say, where is all this forfeiture? I told the girls, says, we just read the parsha, Abraham was so wealthy, and Isaac was so wealthy, and Jacob is so wealthy, and then Sarah is so beautiful, and Rebecca is so beautiful. This is what it says in the Torah. So this idea that they're living these monastic lives, and they're austere ascetics, I don't see it. Where does it say that? Citation needed, as Wikipedia tells us. That's number 1. This idea of having to do an exchange, of having to do a trade-off, where this world, we're just giving up. Where is that? Who has a rich communal life, and a rich spiritual life, and a strong familial life, and a rich and fertile spiritual and intellectual life? We are supposed to drink wine and eat meat and enjoy ourselves, not, of course, to become nihilistic and hedonistic. But the idea that we're supposed to deny ourselves this world, I don't see the sources. So I feel like there is a little bit of the assumption of the question that is flawed. That's point number 1. I think, of course, it can be elaborated upon. But point number 2 is that we're not 100% sure that it exists. We actually have abundant evidence that the world to come does exist. Both evidence from scripture that we know is true, and evidence from a logical perspective. So that's important to mention. And the last thing that I said about this subject was that even if we don't have evidence, that the world to come is true, what we know for sure is that this world, it has an endpoint. I told the guy, I said, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but you one day are going to die. And what happens then with all the pleasures that you try to amass in this world? What we know for sure is that this world is not permanent. And therefore, I argued, it makes sense, even absent evidence, to trade even the potential of an eternal life of reward and pleasure in Olam Haba for this world. So I don't think we have to do a trade-off. I actually think the system they might design gives us both this world and the next world. Of course, it demands more work for us, but that is true with any great thing you want to accomplish. But even if it were to be true, it's a worthwhile exchange to give up this world, which we know for sure is a rapidly depreciating entity. It makes sense to exchange that for even the potential of permanence. Why? Because even if we don't know it's true, it's better to have either infinity or zero than definite zero. If you have to choose one of two options, one is definitely zero, and one is either zero or it's infinity. Which one would you prefer? That was the final argument. They said, well, don't they say that it's only 12 months in Gehenna? So why? I'll just take that option. I said, well, lady, 12 months in Gehenna. How much do you know about Gehenna? It sounds to me that you don't know much about it. Because if you do, I don't think you'll be so lackadaisical and cavalier about accepting 12 months there. And plus, that's the only place you could end up. And then they stopped me and they said, don't talk too much about this. So I said, I'll stop. And anyhow, these are some of the conversations that we had. It was enjoyed at the time, I think, I was told. And I hope you got something out of this as well. If there are any of these subjects or any other subject you'd like to discuss a little bit further, let me know. Maybe we'll do another podcast of this sort or some discussion of this sort. As always, my email address is rabbiwolbe@gmail.com. Okay, who's jumping in first?
I have to. I'm sorry. Okay, there's a lot here. But I came in with a question and I kind of needed to get that answered. I'm sorry. Just by looking at something, is there a way to tell whether or not it's a cake, which bracha to do, if it's a cake dough or a bread dough? If it's like something that may be a pumpkin bread that has an icing on it, then it becomes something else. And is there a way for me just to immediately determine which one is which?
If you don't know what the ingredients are, it's hard.
Okay. Okay.
You have to know the ingredients.
Okay. So that's a good answer. That's what I thought. Okay. Can I ask now?
Yeah, go ahead.
When you say, if we believe that the Almighty's wisdom and becomes like that, we're supposed to have that wisdom from the Almighty.
Mm-hmm.
But okay.
Go ahead.
I feel in some sense that superiority is a word that triggers a lot of defensiveness. I don't always like to use superiority. And I had this conversation with someone on Shabbos with a guy from Houston. But I feel like, is it superiority, or is it that we use the Torah as a handbook of living and other people don't use the Torah as a handbook of living? And
listen, it sounds, Jennifer, like you're scared of saying it. Let's just say it. What are we scared of? Again, it's important to note,
we are a people that everybody wants to kill.
Of course, that's part of the package.
Right. But if we use that word superiority rather than we're just different, and it's just a lifestyle.
Jennifer, I'll tell you, the worst outbreak of anti-Semitism in all of human history. Do you know where that was?
There's multiple.
What was the worst?
For me, it was
no, not for you. For the nation.
The Inquisition.
Way worse than the Inquisition.
The Holocaust.
That's right. Okay. There was no place where the Jews were as similar to their neighbors in any point in all of Jewish history as in Germany at the beginning of the 20th century. There's no place in history where the Jews were as integrated. So the idea that us not being different is somehow going to save us, it's just not true. We're different. I say embrace it. Now, again, it's important to we don't put anyone down. We don't feel like we personally earned it. I try to stress that. We're born, if you're born into it, you're lucky, you're fortunate. You have to, the question was not about gloating. The question was not about us walking around and saying, and kind of being haughty about it. Of course not. So I agree with you on that. But the idea to say that the Jewish nation, the Jewish people are not supreme in this particular area, especially when everyone else is welcome to join if they want, not a problem.
But that also leaves that, I think in some sense, that needs to be addressed between Jews first, because there's always that religious superiority or religious inferiority that people look at each other and this person isn't holding where I am, and I'm superior to them, and my relationship with Hashem is better than theirs. I think that first needs to be addressed before I go and sit there and talk about other.
I agree with that. That's fair.
Okay, there's one other thing. So I agree with you about the desensitizing of movies and too much of that exposure.
Mm-hmm.
How do we address, like, especially for me personally, where I have 3 kids in college and I know that they're overly exposed, and I don't want them to be, I just don't want that. How do I put them in some sort of a secular recovery?
It's very hard to influence your college age children. It's very, very, very hard. I don't know how you would do that. You could try, but you're limited in how much you can influence them. That's just the way it is.
Idea to say this is where I was.
Yeah, you could definitely try that, but I don't know of any formula that's like that's a panacea, that's a silver bullet. I don't know of any.
Okay, one last thing. If Abraham was constantly tested,
yes,
and we're constantly tested, how do we live up to an expectation to not go off the derrick and just think, okay, well, I'm constantly being tested. Why am I being tested for what? I mean, what am I being tested for? Is it emunah b'tachon? Is it?
Everyone's tested. Everyone's tested in different ways, because everyone has a different area where they need to overcome. But right. Emunah is definitely one of them. Emunah is for everyone, because emunah is, which means faith, is the one quality that really towers over all.
But in some sense, that almost, if I tried to explain that to someone, I feel like it sounds like we're trauma bonded to God.
Trauma bonded? Is that a term that I'm supposed to be familiar with? What does that mean?
Oh,
we're bonded by trauma?
Essentially, yeah.
Well, maybe we are. We're trauma bonded. I like that. Trauma bonded to God. I like that.
Okay, that's it. I'm going to let everybody else go.
Interesting questions. Go ahead, Tim.
Morning, Rabbi. Thank you. You said a lot of things. I wish we had hours to talk about it, but we don't. As a non-Jew listening, to me, it seemed the words better than and superior, that's correct. They as a non-Jew listening, that's a pretty negative thing. It seemed it would have been more correct to say Israel's purpose was more holy than everybody's else, because it seems to me that that's what, when God chose Israel, it was for a purpose, to be a light to the nation.
Yeah, so I said that point. Yeah, we have the higher mission.
A higher mission. Yeah, that's not like being better than or superior to.
Everyone's scared of saying it.
Okay, well, I'm just telling you what would be listening. And so that brought me to this question. Well, I wrote down some questions for things I'm studying out, and you hit every one. My first one is, isn't all humanity and creation interconnected?
Of course.
Right, so us as humans, we feel like we're separate from everything. And actually, that's an illusion. Isn't that true?
What do you mean?
Like I feel like what I do and what I think and what's going on around me, I'm like separate from it. But that's not true. That's an illusion. Everything I do and every word I speak has an effect on everything.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Okay, so Israel's purpose as a light to the nation was to be our advisor to the rest of the
Absolutely.
So when we're making our laws and rules, we should be able to look to Israel, and they're doing it, or they could advise us, no, this here in the Torah, it teaches mankind this, and so that law or rule you're doing, it's contrary. You need to rethink that. And then they'll take it and do what they will with it because they're not Israel, they're their nation. But if they're righteous and pious, they will listen to that advice and adjust themselves. Which you hit on one of the points I made when you talked about the marriage. Okay, because if same-sex marriage has been legalized and homosexuality lifestyle made normal, that doesn't make it not a sin. That means society has said that sin's not a sin, which is not okay. Isn't that right?
Well, I don't even want to discuss.
I know.
My point was not to discuss that.
Let me say it in a different way then. If a society says something that the Torah says is a sin, that doesn't make it not a sin. It's still a sin, right?
Of course, yeah.
So isn't it Israel's responsibility then when one of the nations are doing something that's contrary to what Torah teaches us to live together? Because that's the whole idea. Israel is there to advise us and show us the way. So if a nation's doing something, shouldn't they point it out? Israel as a nation, like,
the question, I don't think we actually have so much responsibility to try to legislate and govern for other nations.
No,
we're supposed to be an example, but I don't know how active we have to be in promoting.
Only if the nation were to request your advice. Then.
Yeah, of course. If they ask, then we should offer. But your question was, should we actively go and say that? I don't think we need to.
Okay, yeah, I kind of agree with that too, because the nation should already voluntarily have, like here in America, we said we're going to follow Noahide laws. That example you used directly is against Noahide.
That's correct. That's correct.
So I get your point. Maybe not, like go on the news and say, hey, look at Japan, they did this and it's not right. I get that. They should have they should have reasoned within themselves, and if they felt it was contrary, maybe asked Israel for advice. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how this whole system's supposed to work. Because I think that's kind of what I was thinking about. Is as a non-Jew, I'm here. I'm trying to learn and understand. I agree with Israel can trace itself back. You got a list of every rabbi to today back to Moses. And then prior to Moses, there's evidence that the nations knew the Noahide laws. Like they would kill a guy instead of just taking his wife. First they'd kill him and then take his wife. They were aware that they weren't allowed to do stuff. And so that had to come from somewhere. So I was just a little bit, I guess the word's offended when I hear better than in superior.
Yeah, I know. That's why it's such a controversial question. Yeah. So, yeah. Well, the intention is not to offend anyone,
Right.
but
I get that. And you're right. It's a conversation. That's these kind of things everybody needs to be talking about it, so we can get things in the way it's all supposed to function.
mhm.
All right. Well, thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. Okay.
I've heard it. I like the way I love the class always. And but I've heard it presented, and it depends who I'm talking to as to how I'll present this. But that we were like the oldest kid that said we do Hashem a favor, right? And when he said who wanted the Torah, and we said we take up the mantle without asking a question. And because we did that, we were given the responsibility more. And so when I present to some people like that, they're less offended of the you're better, I'm this, and I take away the
question is,
better.
are we doing apologetics here the question is, I was trying to answer the question.
I get that. I totally get it.
Yeah.
Totally get it.
So, and again, I tried to stress this point that the Torah in fact says it's not because of you didn't earn it. You didn't earn it. You have the ability to do greater things spiritually because of what you were given, but you didn't earn it.
Did
Okay,
we earn it on some level because we didn't ask what was in it?
Oh yes. So that, yes. So that's a very good point. That there are some parts of it that we did on our own. Now, Paul asked a very interesting question in the chat. I'll read it to you. If Abraham's spiritual genetics were passed to descendants, and don't descendants of Ishmael, Keturah's other children, Esau, also have Abraham's spiritual genetics? How does it differ from that which was passed to Isaac and Jacob? Okay, so first of all, there is a difference between Abraham's children, Abraham's 7 sons that he bore with Hagar / Keturah, and Isaac, right? Because they have a different mother, right? So the genetical cocktail that went to Isaac is different than what went to those other 7. But yes, you are absolutely correct, Paul, that Ishmael does share some of Abraham's characteristics. I spoke about this recently in a podcast, how Ishmael and his descendants, they excel in hospitality. Where does that come from? They too are descendants of Abraham. And similar with Esau. Similarly with Esau. Now, Esau has a different story with it, because Esau was twin brothers with Jacob, but there was an exchange. There's an exchange. The way the sages say it is that because they were twins, they're in it together, but there was a separation of all the good went one way and all the bad, or almost all the bad went the other way. It was like 99 to 1 on either side. That's what our sages tell us. And the whole fight between Jacob and Esau is who's gonna win. Esau wants to capture Jacob, and Jacob wants to capture Esau, and this is Parsha. Jacob's trying to grab the heel. Why is he trying to grab the heel? He's trying to grab the heel because he wants to get that last 1% that was allocated to Esau. So yes, there is some degree of the Abraham and Isaac qualities that were given to Esau, but it wasn't it wasn't exactly the same as what was given to Jacob. Now, I mentioned this a couple of months ago in the Parsha podcast. The sources do talk about how Esau eventually will repent. And that's part of the Messianic movement, or let me rephrase it, not Messianic movement, but Messianic destiny, and that is to bring Esau back in the fold. Because after all, he's Abraham and Sarah's grandson. And not only that, he shares all the genes. So there's not a different mother, right? It's Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and Rebekah. That's the pedigree of Esau. So to understand where Ishmael, so to speak, does not exhibit this collection of qualities is easier than with Esau. So the answer to your question is yes. Esau and Ishmael do have some of these characteristics, but they don't have the full package. Only that was perpetuated with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to the descendants of Jacob. And I will note, Esau did not spend 400 years in Egypt, which is refining and developing those qualities. A very astute question, as we've come to expect from you, Paul. Tim and Kay both still have their hands raised. I don't know if they still want to ask questions or it's just leftovers. I don't know if you're talking to us, Tim, but you're on mute. So if you're talking to us, we don't hear you.
Sorry about that. During your discussion there, it just made me think of something else. So I'm a non-Jew. And so I know about the 7 laws, and I know that I need to adjust myself. And I know I hope my nation could. I think they're both important, individually and as the nation that I live in. Okay. But as a non-Jew, I still can get in the next life.
Of course.
And so the reason to convert is if I wanted to have that responsibility given to Judah to carry the Torah forward, as well as adjust my life to be able to carry out that responsibility. And as a non-Jew, my job is to recognize the 7 Noahide laws and individually do that. And as a light in my own community, try to maybe not, develop a group and try to change the nation, but maybe that is it. It seems like we each have our own responsibility, which doesn't make one better or less than the other, but really actually as important, because in the end, we're all going to go to the same house of prayer. Is everybody in the whole world going to convert to Judaism? Or is it that we're all going to live our lives the way Hashem commanded us to, blessed be, and that, that interconnection between all of us will become a reality and a beautiful thing. I'm a little confused sometimes.
Yeah, it's a big subject, but despite the fact that everyone who's righteous ends up in the world to come, there are differences between the standing of people there and of nations there. And the nations are going to be kept separate. Talmud tells us that, and we know that from the other sources. So the separation and the standing is going to be different. Every individual and every nation is going to be on its own. And again, I'm not trying to convince anyone to convert, make that abundantly clear. But your broader point that everyone has a chance to be righteous and to be good and to be elevated and to have a portion of what to come, that is, I think, very important, like we mentioned. Yes, absolutely.
So when the Torah says, then the 7 people will grab the tits of one Israelite, and it's not talking about conversion. It's talking about, their minds are open and they understand that there's a way that you're supposed to be, and that person they're grabbing their tits is the one to show them that. Or
well, again, that's the objective. That's the end game. The Messiah, I always say, we're going to talk about it soon, and when we continue our 13 Principles of Faith series. But Messiah is a subject that is primarily oriented around advancing the nations, not advancing the Jewish people. The Jewish people, of course, but it's about bringing universality to the belief in God. And it's kind of bringing the rest of the world up to speed. So that's what's being referenced there.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Thank you. Sandy, we're ready. I think.
Well, this has just been so fascinating, and but thinking about the idea of thinking better and superior, whatever word we want to use. When I look at the Jewish people I have come to know and love, and you're at the top of that list.
Oh, thank you.
I don't see any attitudes of superiority. I see great humility. I see great gratitude that you have been given what you have been given. And it made me think back to, if we bring it down from worldview to the Jewish nation, did they look, or did the high priest think they were better than the rest of the Jews? No, I don't get that impression. It seemed like Aaron was very reluctant to be chosen the high priest, didn't think he was worthy. So when we look at it that way, it's more, I see it more as being very humble and very grateful for
Yes.
having chosen to have been given that great responsibility.
Absolutely. That's a very good point. I think it does take a little bit of the edge off the question. Oh, the term supremacy has such bad connotations. But yeah, presented that way, I think it does mitigate it a little bit. Absolutely. So that's very, very good. I wrote it down here. I'll see if we could add that into my notes. Yes, absolutely. And it's a good example of the Kohen Gadol, right? The Kohen Gadol is supposed to be, he towers above everyone else. But what does that demand of him? And how is he supposed to comport himself? Very good point.
Hey, Rabbi, instead
Yes.
of using a superiority word, could it be, as Jews are supposed to be an example for leadership?
But that wasn't the question.
I know, but it's just, that's
not controversial. That's not controversial. It's only controversial because why do we think we're better? So do we, and why do we? So, and again, what does better mean? What does that mean? So,
it's like saying, is a keto diet better than Atkins? I mean, how do you, it's just perspective. And it's not necessary. There's no way to prove it because it's fluid, because those terms are fluid by just this person's opinion or perspective versus to someone else's. It seems like it's.
But the question is, what is our perspective about this question? That was the subject. Right,
but it just derails into something else. It's hard to prove the point when it just. I think because you're right, it does trigger a whole lot of other things. And so how do you get that point across without automatically turning someone into that cringy feeling like, oh, he used that word? And it is a little cringy. Sorry.
Listen, that's why it's a controversial question.
Okay.
Paul's asking another question in the chat. That did Noah fail his mission, or maybe the world was just not ready for it? I think that our sages seem to favor the former. And Noah did fail in his mission, or he partially failed. He definitely succeeded in part of his mission, in that he was able to save himself and save humanity, and save all the animals, etc. But he also failed in another part, in that he didn't bring the rest of humanity on board. And there was no excellence that was able to spread outwardly to everyone else. And that's why he's criticized. So I think it's probably somewhere in the middle, he did fail to a certain extent in his mission, but he obviously did succeed as well. That's why he has so much praise in the Torah. And he's praised because he was a great man. He's also criticized because he wasn't quite as great as maybe he should have been, or maybe other people were. Joe, what are your thoughts?
The term superiority, and I agree with you, that has some negative connotations. There might be a slightly different term that could be better. It's optimal. And I came across this when I took calculus years ago. And we were studying mathematically when you have different functions merging together at a particular point. You have an intersection of different functions, and that intersection of functions is called the optimal point. And I was just thinking, if Hashem is trying to pick maybe not a superior race, but the optimal.
No, I'm going to stop you. Not race.
Oh,
not a race.
Yes.
Nation.
Nation.
Not race.
I'm sorry.
Yes. There's all
Stand
kinds
corrected.
of races that are included. But go ahead.
An optimal nation for a particular purpose. That could very easily be a choice that would not be made merely by genetics, but could be a variety of factors that are identified by a superior being in advance, conceivably in a mathematical way. That's all.
There is a verse. I just Googled it. There is a verse that says, this is Deuteronomy 26:19. And I mentioned it briefly, but I didn't go to the source. Let's see how Artful translates it. 26:19. They usually do a very good job in translating it. See the words that they use. Okay, I'll read from, let's read from 16. This day Hashem your God commands you to perform all these decrees, okay? You have distinguished Hashem your God, walk in his ways, commandments, statutes, heart, and his voice. And Hashem has distinguished you today, okay, distinguished, to be for him a treasured people, as he spoke to you, and to observe all his commandments, and to make you supreme over all the nations that he made, for praise, for renown, and for splendor, so that you will be a holy people to Hashem your God, as he spoke. That is the words, that's the words that they use here. I'm just reading what it says over here. So, supreme on all the nations, that's what Hashem makes us. And again, I we could quibble with the words. That's what it says. So, I don't want to engage in any apologetics here, but that's what it says. What can I do? Elyon means elevated. Maybe is maybe a word you could say, but
My Torah says treasured.
It says treasured.
Treasured, a treasured people.
That's verse 19.
What Joe just said about optimum, that in my mind, and when I'm trying to put it all together, that works perfect.
Of course, that works perfectly. But the question is, what's the correct translation? In verse 19, it says optimal. It says what was the word they said? Treasured.
It says, and Hashem has distinguished you today to be for him a.
So that's verse 8. That's verse 18. What does verse 19 say?
And to make you supreme over all nations that he made is for praise and for renown and for splendor, and so that you will be a holy people to Hashem, which still lines up with optimal.
Yeah, okay, but the word that he uses is supreme, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sure does.
Yeah, this is a tough
It
subject.
doesn't seem like that's saying superior or better. You're the perfect one for right there where it all comes together. But it's all good for me. I
Martha, what do you say,
understand
Martha?
how important it is for you to be here for me, Rabbi, and that you're teaching me. And so, you gotta give me time for my mind to wrap around things.
That's fine. I listen. I don't want to offend anyone. That's what I'm worried
You're not.
about.
I want you to know you're not. I just gotta say out loud what's in myself, right?
Well, for sure, I don't want to offend anyone here. That's for sure. Martha.
Yes, sir. Several things that we have to look at differently than most people do. We aren't telling others that we are so special, we're sanctimonious, we're better than you. Yes, we are favored. Yes. I mean, the Jewish nation is favored. The Jewish nation is special. The Jewish nation and all the people in it have many, many, many more responsibilities than those of us who aren't. And what we need to keep our eye on, if it wasn't for the Jewish nation, there would be no Mashiach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and you're right. I think we don't need to publicize it per se. We don't need to put bumper stickers putting anyone down.
We need to not judge others.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. All true.
Comes.
Yes. Not
And
yeah.
something I learned on last week's Parsha was, why were they emphasizing Sarah's years so much, and why, when it says it's her life, that they talk about her death? And part of it, they said, was your life is never complete until your physical death. And then all your acts and everything. And remember, it only takes a moment for someone to sin and not make it into the world to come.
Absolutely.
But on the other hand, it only takes a moment for teshuva and be allowed.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I always think about is, and I love the Psalms. I read a lot of them every day and push myself to try to understand. How many times does it say that Hashem loves those who love him?
Mm-hmm.
That those who fear him, he'll answer our prayers. That those who trust him, he will let us ask for things and he will do them. So there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things that we have to keep in mind. And may I say something to Jennifer about her children?
Yeah, go ahead.
I heard a story last night. It made a huge impact on me. And they were talking about a father who had a son who was rebelling from following the Jewish ways as he was taught as a youngster. When he reached his 19 years and older, he just completely went astray, would not follow or listen. The father did one thing silently every day to help this child remember his Judaism. And eventually one day, it's like he just woke up, like a bolt of lightning hit him. And he was surrounded by the love of God. And I have one suggestion for you, Jennifer. Every week, send an email to your children, wishing them Shabbat Shalom. But whatever you do, do it regularly. And don't make it a forced issue. Just love them. That was the whole point of the message. Love them. So they always know they can trust you and come back.
Very nice, very beautiful, very eloquent. Thank you so much for that, Martha. Okay, everyone, this was a ton of fun. I like the controversy. We should do more controversy next week. Politics, abortion. What else is there on the docket? I'll see you next week. We'll get back to something a little bit more standard, but I enjoyed this, and thank you all for your interesting.
Thank you, Rabbi. It was
Yes, thank
wonderful.
you. Great to see all of y'all. Take care. Have a great week. Okay, take care. Bye.